So, you open Google Chrome on your phone, you're rushing to buy tickets to a concert that all your friends are going to. Picture yourself now, crowd surfing to the front, being invited onto the stage, backstage the world tour, and before you know it, you're dancing in Tokyo. Wait, what? 3 tickets left? It's a good thing your saved payment details autofill quickly and securely. There's no place like Chrome. Download Google Chrome on your phone.
The all-new Chevy Colorado is made for more. Stacked with the latest in-vehicle technologies like a class-leading 11-inch diagonal center touchscreen and an extra-large wireless charging pad. Plus, it features wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility to make staying connected easy wherever your adventure takes you. Chevy Colorado, made for more. Learn more at Chevrolet.com/truck/Colorado. Claims based on latest competitive data.
Hi, this is Kenny Albert. You're listening to the Broadway Hat Podcast with your host, Kyle Hall, the #1 podcast for all things Rangers hockey.
Welcome back to the Broadway Hat Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hall, and huge Rangers news from last week. I think it might have come even more of a surprise than the Gerard Gallant firing, is Jim Ramsay, the longtime athletic trainer for the Rangers, has been let go after 29 years with the organization. His first year was in the 94-95 season. This guy has been the athletic trainer for 4 Team Canada Olympic Games. He is considered by many to be the best trainer in the business. So I don't know what happened, what went on there for the Rangers to move on from him. He wasn't hired by Gallant, so it wasn't like he was fired because Gerard Gallant was fired. This is a guy who has been there since Colin Campbell was head coach. So he has survived. He's kind of like Benoit Allaire, just kind of been there. As the coaches come in, they just get integrated into the system. And it's very surprising, very surprising. And the rumors is that maybe, possibly, he could have mishandled the Ryan Lindgren injury at the end of the year of some sort, which led to the Rangers playing undermanned for a while there with the Patrick Kane trade and everything. It seems like there's a lot of issues going on with that, and then playing undermanned, playing with, 17 guys, whatever it was, 16 guys for the one game. But yeah, just a very surprising move for the Rangers, and kind of a move that's a head-scratcher of what's going on there. A guy who's been there forever and is considered the best of the best, just got promoted to, the head of conditioning last year, whatever it was, got a bigger job title. So why the move now? I don't know. Not sure. But very interesting. Very interesting move. And like I said, probably more surprising than Gallant. And I thought Gallant should have stayed. And so talking about the head coaching job, there's a lot of questions here. Another big story is now Kyle Dubas is now out in Toronto. And he's already received permission to interview with Pittsburgh. Now, he said that he doesn't want any of the jobs, but that could have been a line of BS just to have Toronto try to re-sign him. Guy wanted $6 million a year to stay in Toronto. Brendan Shanahan said no thanks. I think Pittsburgh might give him that to kind of help that franchise. I think they might think that they have one more run in that Crosby-Malkin team, and if Dubas is the guy that can get them over the hump, I think they'll pay him a ton of money to be there. That Fenway Group has a lot of money to throw around, so I think that could be a possibility, and I think Sheldon Keefe is most likely out of Toronto, so that opens up a couple scenarios here for the Rangers. That could be another very good quality coach on the market that they could possibly bring in to New York, or he could be following Dubas down to Pittsburgh, and that opens up Mike Sullivan, who I think is the home run hire for the Rangers. Bring him back to New York, which would be, bring back a Stanley Cup champion coach that is well respected and well liked, and is really just going to let go because there's new management coming in, and so I think that would be. I mean, for Ranger fans, you should be hoping for that. You should be praying for that. I think that of all the candidates, you look at them, they interviewed Peter Laviolette this week. They interviewed Mike Babcock, which I think would be a bad move. Joel Quenneville met with Gary Bettman about possibly getting reinstated, even though the Rangers aren't apparently interested in him. I still think that's a guy to watch out for if he does get reinstated, but I don't think he is, apparently. I think Gary Bettman is not reinstating him. Obviously the Hartford Wolfpack season just came to an end, so could Chris Knobloch be getting an interview here shortly, and apparently they also interviewed Spencer Carberry, the assistant coach for Toronto. So, I guess if they interview the assistant coach, they probably like the head coach. So that bodes well for Sheldon Keefe if he does want a job. And I think they can interview Jay Leach here pretty soon now that the Kraken have been eliminated. But this is a big hire, obviously. Do you go with a new guy that this Rangers team is ready to win now? Do you go with a new guy and get some new blood, or do you get one of these recycled guys? And these 4 teams that are left in this Stanley Cup Finals, these are all recycled hires. So is that good news for some of these guys? You look at a guy like Peter Laviolette, who I think might be my favorite of them all to come in here. And you think, Laviolette doesn't really, he's not a really exciting hire. But then you look at it, the guy's won a Stanley Cup, been to 3 Cup Finals. I mean, he's won everywhere he's gone. And he got fired with a Caps team, which is old and injured. And he had 2 good years there, and got let go now. But yeah, maybe Laviolette is the guy. Maybe he can come in with his roster as a veteran coach that's been around the block and get them going. I don't know what the answer is. If I did, I'd probably I'd be in the Rangers front office. But I don't know. I don't know if you can go with a Jay Leach, a guy who is an up-and-coming guy, and give him his first chance. I don't know if you can do that with this team. I think you probably have to go with a recycled hire. And I think maybe you wait out the Pittsburgh situation, see if Sullivan comes available. Right now, Sheldon Keefe still has his job with Toronto. Shortly, I think they're going to let him go. That'll be, 7 opening positions. And the Rangers and Toronto will be the top 2 destinations for anybody. So I think, I think that right now they can probably wait it out a little bit and not have to worry about these guys. I think these guys who are up for the Rangers job are going to hold off on going somewhere else. I think Laviolette has already interviewed in Columbus. I can see him saying, "Hey, I'm waiting to see what happens in New York before I commit anywhere else." Talk about Columbus. Gallant interviewed there in Columbus again. He might be returning there, and also Gallant is one of the favorites for the Toronto job if it opens up. So obviously his name is still highly regarded in the market, even though some of the negative things that came out about him in the exit interviews of the Ranger players wanting to move on from him. But the Ramsay thing is still, I don't know what's going on there. And it's very strange when you hear all this turmoil that's coming out. And actually, great guest this week, WFAN and SNY's Chris Lopresti joins us. And CeeLo talks about some of the things that he's heard and the rumors from the locker room was a little bit, divided toward the end of the year. Maybe that played into their poor play in the playoffs. And, a lot of guys were a little upset about, playing under man, which is what I've heard too. And which kind of plays into the Jim Ramsay thing. Like maybe if he did mishandle the lingering thing, that caused a lot of friction in the locker room. And was that what broke the relationship? That obviously there's got to be more there, but the Rangers have come out with nothing since the report from Arthur Staple that he was let go. There's been nothing about it. You would think a guy who's been in the team for almost 30 years, there'd be some type of thanks rammer or whatever it is. Guys like Wayne Gretzky have said he's the best trainer they ever dealt with. Patrick Kane talked about how great he was and how he was the reason why he was on the ice every night. The guy is loved by everybody, and all of a sudden he's just out of nowhere. So very weird, very confusing. But yeah, CeeLo and I talk about all that, and we talk about the big question, which I think a lot of Ranger fans are asking themselves: was this year a success? Was it? What was it? Would they overachieve the year before? Was this a disappointment? What was this year? What was this season? I think that's what you have to look at now to wrap up this year. Is you have to see what last season was a success. Was this year a success? I don't know if you can say that after this playoff run. And I think there's more questions, a lot more questions, obviously, this offseason than last going forward. And obviously you have the cap hell that the Rangers are in now. How they're going to get around that? How is Chris Drury going to finally, pull them out of this? And because they're going to need some type of injection into this team. And I don't know how you do that with the cap situation without moving some players, but all your top players have no trade clauses. So a guy like Barclay Goodrow, who I'm a big fan of, is most likely going to have to go. He's going to have to go somewhere so they can bring in other assets that are not a fourth-line center that could help the top 6. Do you go into a season again with Capo Caco as a top 6 forward only to have him get demoted again? Do you give Alexis Lafreniere another chance, or do you move on from him? These are the what kind of deals Country Miller get? Like, how much cap space is he going to eat now? Huge questions that people who make a lot more money than me will decide. So there's so many questions now surrounding this team. You went from somehow 107 point, whatever it was this year, points that they were winning, they won, one of the best records overall in team history, to now all these question marks, which is crazy because, they're still playing now in the conference finals. This year it's as a success. They're talking about, Gerard Gallant for a long-term extension. And, it ends in the second year of them blowing a 2-0 series lead in a series. And now you're looking back and thinking, can they trade Artemi Panarin? That's what people are talking about now, which is crazy. These are the conversations that Ranger fans are having now, which is crazy to think from where you were April 1st. So, great interview with CeeLo. Before I send over to our interview with Chris, here's a quick message from a few of our sponsors. Caldera Labs. Say goodbye to the generic face wash on your counter because Caldera Lab is here to save the day when it comes to your skin. Backed by a leading clinical trial where 9 out of 10 men experience healthier and visible improved skin, Caldera Lab has the tools to unlock your best first impression and confidence. Today we have an exclusive offer for you, our audience, so you can try it for yourself. And you can see why so many men trust Caldera Lab with their skincare needs. Use our code BROADWAY at calderalab.com for 20% off their best product. Listen, as I'm getting older, in my 30s now, you got to take care of your skin. And these guys are out there helping you take care of your skin. They're helping you with your wrinkles. They're keeping they're keeping you young. They're keeping you young. They keep you look good. Caldera Labs creates a high-performance men's skincare product by combining pharmaceutical-grade science along with nature's purest and most potent ingredients. Kicking off their stellar skincare selection, we have the Regimen Bundle, a twice-a-day routine to transform your skin. Inside this bundle, you'll find the Clean Slate, the Base Layer, and the Good. The Clean Slate is where you start your day. It's balancing cleanser that uses gentle plant-based cleansing, leaving all skin types exceptionally refreshed. The Base Layer is a nutrient-dense, fortifying moisture that hydrates your skin and absorbs fast, leaving you with a matte finish so you can start your day confidently. And the Good is your go-to at night before bed, and it's clinically proven multifunctional serum that helps your skin look tighter and smoother, as well as helps reduce visibility of wrinkles and fine lines. How can you not beat that? As you age, you might notice more fine lines and wrinkles. It's a sign of aging, unfortunately. This is the opposite of what any guy wants, really what anyone wants. And the more you neglect your skin, the more visible this will become over time. It's time to control your skin and take these easy steps. Ready to take your skin to the next level with Caldera Lab? Look no further than the Icon. The Rejuvenating Eye Serum is here to help address the three most common skin concerns around the eye: fine lines, dark circles, and puffiness. The three worst things you can have. Committed to transparency, sustainability, and excellence, Caldera Lab is on the mission to better men's skincare around the world, priding itself on clean ingredients and doing right by its customers and planet we live in. Caldera Lab is certified B Corporation as well as a member of the 1% for the planet. Through uncompromised craftsmanship, exceptional ingredients, and rigorous transparency, Caldera Lab is here to upgrade your skin and confidence. So make sure to get 20% off today by using our code BROADWAY at calderalab.com. That's 20% off at calderalab.com by using the code BROADWAY. And we're also joined by our friends over at Kinzuri. Fellas, have you ever wished you were a little bit taller? Maybe you matched on Tinder and her profile said must be 6 feet tall. Maybe your date wears heels and you just can't because you're just not, or she just can't because you're just not tall enough. Well, Short Kings, today's sponsor, has you covered. Kinzuri makes shoes that make you up to 2.8 inches taller without anyone noticing. Look, girls get heels, makeup, and push-up bras. Why can't men get a boost in confidence as well? We're all the same height laying down, if you get what I mean. For a limited time offer, our listeners can get up to 15% off every order with your code BROADWAY at kinzuri.com. The site is already 30% off, so with our code, you save an extra 15% off. That's 45% off your entire order. You're basically getting these shoes for free. So make sure you go show the support to the show and go check out kinzuri.com. That's CONZURI.com and use the code BROADWAY. Listen, if you can get a little extra edge in the dating game, I'm out of it way now. I don't even want to think about getting into a dating game ever again. But listen, if you're in there, you're looking for make a good impression, or maybe you're taking a picture with some of your guys at home. Listen, all my friends at home are over 6 feet tall, so maybe the next group shot I have to get these shoes on to make sure that I can fit in a little bit. They don't have to adjust the lens at all. But make sure you go on there, check them out. Not only does Kinzuri shoes make you up to 2.8 inches taller, but they're also incredibly stylish and comfortable. These are not all man shoes. They're not Velcro shoes. They're not ugly, ugly shoes. You'll get compliments in them. Even if they don't even make you taller, you get compliments no matter what. They have styles for every occasion, smart, casual, sporty, you name it, they got it. The height insoles are actually built into the shoe, so no one can tell that you're hiding some secret height boost in there. The brand is also hidden on the shoes and the packaging, so it's literally the ultimate height hack. Life short, you don't have to be. It's time to level up the playing field, my guys. Maybe update that dating profile to 6 feet, because Zori is an absolute game changer for you in your dating life and your rig life in general. So make sure you go on the website, use our discount code Broadway, save that 15% off. You get the 45% off total. Like I said, it's basically free, so make sure you go check it out. Konzuri.com, CONZURI.com, and make sure you use that code Broadway today. All right, we're now joined by a very special guest. You can hear him on WFAN. You can see him on SNY. Chris Lopresti, thanks so much for joining us, buddy.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. Good to be here.
All right, so first off, I know you're a big Rangers fan, obviously. That's why I wanted to get you on the show. But going back, who's your favorite Ranger of all time?
Easy one. My favorite Ranger of all time is also my favorite athlete of all time, and that would be the great Mike Richter. I don't know why I attached to him, but I started watching the Rangers and hockey pretty regularly on the time the Rangers were getting ready to make their run to the Cup. So it was sort of the perfect time to jump on board. And I was a huge equipment guy as a little kid, like catcher's equipment, hockey gear, whatever the case may be. So I think the allure of the goalie, loved his Statue of Liberty mask, and obviously the fact that he was played such a pivotal role and then winning the Cup in '94. Just a guy that I worshipped from a young age. And to this day, all the athletes that have come and gone have had some favorites, but he's my guy, and I don't see that ever changing.
Best goalie mask of all time, like not even a question. And Igor wearing like the faux one this year was awesome.
Yeah, I love that he brought that back, and it kind of coincided with him finding his game and really being the one thing they had consistently going in the playoffs. So I think there might have been a connection there.
I was a Graves guy. My brother was a Richter fan. I think you had to have one at core 4, right? As a
any 80s, of those
80s, early wrong. 90s baby. Like that's like those are your guys, right?
100%. Can't go wrong with any of those guys for sure.
All right, this year's Rangers team. I think the question going into the year was what kind of team were they? You know, what the last year, the year before was just such a huge step for them, right? They get to the conference finals, and then all this momentum coming to this year, and they start off slow, and then the Trouba helmet toss kind of turns the whole season around. But I guess, do you see this year as a failure? Do you see this year as a next step? Because it's kind of thing like, did they overachieve the year before, or was that the team they were? Like, there's so many questions surrounding that.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. I've kind of been battling this, not just with the Rangers, but a bunch of the local teams, the Knicks too. I think sometimes the real answer is in the details. So when you kind of look at the overall, you say, okay, I would agree. Last year, I think caught a lot of us by surprise, overachieved a little, getting as far as they did. Little help along the way, you know, some favorable goaltender matchups in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. But because of the success that they had, and because of some of these contracts that they've locked themselves into, and because they do have a lot of top end talent, I think we all reasonably expected more than what they offered in the postseason. So if I step back and say, okay, you know what, they lost to a Devil team that actually was a slight favorite in the playoff series and finished ahead of them in the regular season. On paper, you would say, all right, you know what, they got beat by a better team. But if I look at the minutia and really delve into the specifics and the details of the series, and look at the fact that they were up 2-0, look at how poorly they played in games 4, 5, and 7, just really no pushback whatsoever. And then the fact that it sounds like the players basically spoke up and said, we don't want the head coach here. Not that I'm the biggest Gerard Gallant guy. It's just everything kind of crashed and burned. Obviously, they went all in with the moves they made at the deadline with Kane and Tarasenko, to a lesser extent, bringing Mikkola aboard, but all guys that now are without contracts. And now they enter an offseason where there's a ton of question marks and they don't have a lot of wiggle room. So from that standpoint, right now, as I look at it, it's hard to imagine, you know, them being able to get to that next step unless something drastically changes. So I don't know if that's going to be the new head coach or some sort of move that maybe we're, you know, not exactly honed in on just yet, something that might come out of left field in the offseason. But for me, I thought it was a failure. Maybe that's me being a tough grader. But again, when I look at the way that they played in that series, and I look at the the logistics and the specifics and the dynamics of it, it was really disappointing. And I still am kind of scratching my head at just how poorly they played after they went up 2-0.
I think the thing that kind of I'm still not hung up on it. You get you get over it, whatever it is. But the thing that sticks out to me was the games they won. Like they won those games. Like I know that game 6, it was a slower first period, but they really turned it on in the game there. Games 1 and 2, I mean, for the power play was rolling, and all of a sudden, it's like someone turned the lights off on them. Like all of a sudden, the offense just disappeared. And I think that's the most difficult thing for a fan to kind of be like, there's 2 different teams you saw out there.
Yeah, I think once the Devils kind of got their feet wet and found their game, the Rangers just never had an answer to what they were presenting, both from a speed standpoint, forechecking, tenacity against, anytime the Rangers had the puck coming through the neutral zone. I mean, you go right down the list. And yes, the final score and the end result of game 6 was pretty one-sided for the Rangers. But like you said, that first period was not going their way at all. And without Igor Shesterkin in there, they could have found themselves in a much bigger hole. And I still believe had that puck not found its way into the net off Chris Kreider's, shin pad, we might have been looking at a much different game. And that's another concerning thing for me, that it seemed like in this series, for whatever reason, the Rangers were kind of waiting around for the tide to turn or for it to be handed to them a little bit, rather than going and taking it. And that was that tenacity and just the desire and the hunger that I saw from the Devils that a lot of times I didn't see from the Rangers. So yes, the series went 7. So 10 years from now, if you didn't watch every game, you say, oh, that was a 7-game series, but it wasn't the 7-game series we were expecting. Certainly not anything that would hold up against like what we saw between the 2 teams back in 94, not even the 6-gamer that we got in 2012. It was just, it felt very outside of the overtime game, obviously in game 3, all the other games for the most part were pretty one-sided, which was a little unexpected for me.
Game 7. I mean, great time for Adam Fox to have his worst game of his life, basically.
Oh my gosh.
And then, Chris Kreider, who had a great series, he goes a -7, -4 in the game. I mean, Keandre Miller looked lost in that last. Keandre Miller lost a ton of money, I feel like, too, in this playoffs, unfortunately. I'm a huge Keandre Miller fan.
Yeah.
I feel like he was a guy who just kind of went missing. But that game 7, I mean, you kind of, all these game 7s you show at Lundqvist, I feel like Ranger fans kind of like, hey, the Rangers get up for game 7. Like last year, they went 2-0 in game 7. And like they're hanging around, and then the Fox giveaway, and then the whole wheels just fell off from there. And it was kind of one of those things like, you wait, like you said, like you wait for the tide to turn, like you waited for something momentum to come, and just didn't. It never did. They just got outplayed again.
Yeah, and the Fox play and the turnover was sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back, because up until that point, they were getting dominated. They were getting manhandled. And again, without Shesterkin being Shesterkin, and I get it, he's the goalie. That's what he gets paid to do. But if I stack him up against some of the other goaltenders and some of the goaltending that we've seen in the playoffs so far, I mean, you put any other goalie in that spot, in that game and in that series, and it would have been, I think, even uglier than it turned out to be. So, I've got nothing but good things to say about him. And I think the only reason that they were hanging by a thread in that game up until the Fox play was solely because of the work he was doing between the pipes. It's very disheartening. Again, no pushback. It just seemed like they could be blown over by like a little wind gust in this, in that game and in the series. And like, I get it. They were built to be more of a finesse team, a top end talent team. We kind of knew that coming in. And that was one of the concerns was, well, okay, if the power play dries up or the top 6 don't score, what's going to happen? But it went beyond that. Like the kid line didn't do what they did last year in the playoffs. The fourth line that we were all excited to see had a lot of down moments, I thought, in the series as well, and did not have the impact that I was expecting. So from top to bottom, again, you go right down the roster. I think everybody had their bad moments outside of the goaltender, and that was just really tough to swallow.
Now, was there a guy this year that kind of stood out to you for maybe, I know the kid like Hedel kind of stood out to me for like the next step. Like, was there a guy to you that like really impressed you this year that you were like, okay, he took that next step, or like maybe Trocheck was like a signing? Like, was there a guy for you that stuck out to you?
Yeah, I think Hedel's the obvious choice, and obviously they felt good enough to extend him in season. Maybe they catch a little bit of a discount there, or at least at the time it felt that way, because had he gone into the playoffs again and performed the way he did last year, the opposite of what you said about Keandre Miller probably would have, boosted his AAV. I would say more so down the roster, maybe less obvious. I'd like to see more of Braden Schneider, and I don't know that that's going to be in the cards just because of the way that they're set up and the way that they're locked into a lot of these contracts. But that's a young guy that's got a lot of experience under his belt now. I do understand he hasn't been asked to do a ton outside of playing those third pair minutes. Not a lot of specialty teams time for him just yet, which is fine. But if I'm looking at a guy that I was like, okay, I see some positive things here. I thought at times he was one of their more impactful defensemen and played the right style in that Devils series. Like we were waiting around for Trouba to do his thing, and unfortunately waited till Game 7. I don't want to say waited. I understand you can't. Sometimes you got to go out of it's almost like you have to go out of your way to have that sort of impact. But I felt like Braden Schneider was probably their most physical defenseman, at least what popped out to me and was evident all coming off the screen and watching a lot of those games. So I'm curious to see where he goes from here. Again, with the contract situation, like I don't know exactly how that's going to shake out depth chart wise next year. But if I look at their young guys and try to take a look at who I thought, had showed some signs of life, both in the regular season and in the postseason, that would probably be a lesser obvious name that I would circle when I look at the roster.
I guess same question, but the other way. Who you think had disappointing year in your eyes?
I got to try and remove the postseason from that, I guess. Which it's tricky because, it's hard to overlook just how disappointing Panarin and Zibanejad were in the Devil series. But those are their, and I've said this on the fan, and I know it's unrealistic and unreasonable. People are like, they got to find a way to get rid of Panarin. Well, it's like, okay, first, who would even want to take on that contract, be able to take on the contract, and would he say yes? But let's say all those things aside, and the answer was yes, and you could pull that off. You're still talking about 90 plus points that you got to replace in your regular season lineup. So I get it. It's about what you do in the playoffs when you get there and making a run to the cup. But you still need the horses to get you there and the production to get you there in the regular season. So it's a very tricky question. He's a gifted, talented player. I love watching him during the regular season. It has not worked, obviously, so far in the playoffs. Mika has been very hot and cold. He found it late in that Penguin series last year, but there's been a lot of games and sequences where it just hasn't clicked. But if I'm trying to answer that question for the overall duration of the season, and maybe this is unfair, I would probably go with Lafreniere. I'm kind of done with him, to be honest with you. And maybe that's why I'm sitting here in my son's bedroom instead of, working in upper management for an NHL team. Like, I understand all that they invested in him, and he's played third line, similar to Kakko, hasn't gotten a lot of power play time. So it's tough to expect a ton of development. But I just don't see an impact. I don't see an impact player there. Can he play on the third and fourth line and have a nice NHL career, to throw a name out there, like a Manny Malhotra did, different position? Sure. But now that the Rangers are up against it with the cap and he's due another contract, I don't know that that's a guy that I'd be wanting to make another commitment to and another investment in, because I just don't know what the long-term upside is right now.
I was talking about Lafreniere, obviously he's an RFA. You're in Chris Drury's seat right now. Do you bring him back, A? Or do you try to, obviously there's rumors that Vancouver's interested in him. A couple of teams are interested in him. I think Chicago was interested in him at the trade deadline when they're trying to pull up the Kane deal. I think they're trying to grasp any of the young players Rangers had. But do you pull a trigger on a deal and try to get a first round pick back for him if he has that kind of value? I don't even know what kind of value he has.
I don't know what the value is. I don't know that I'd even dig my heels in on a first round pick. I think I would just be looking, honestly, to recoup something. And that's, again, maybe that's the wrong move. Maybe it's selling low, but something has to change on this roster. I don't think they can afford to just bring back the same group and hope that it works out this time around. And obviously you're going to be talking about Kane's not going to be here. And I know a lot of people are down on what he did for the Rangers after he came over. Tarasenko gave him some good moments. He's probably not, he's going to be outside their price range. Mikkola, the way he played, the amount of minutes he played, probably going to be outside of what they can afford as well. So if I'm looking at a way to free up some sort of flexibility, if they are looking to bring in an outsider, it's not a lot of money, but to lock up another contract and commit to him being in your top 12, top 9 group of forwards, I think the dynamic has to change. I understand the head coach is going to change. We don't know who that's going to be yet, and maybe that lights the fire. Maybe they're going to play a more defined, structured system, and that's somehow going to change things. But to me, things went so south in that series against the Devils, and they're locked into so many contracts that I don't know that I'd be locking myself into another one for a player that has given you very few bursts of consistent offense compared to where he was drafted and what was expected of him.
Now, I threw out there a couple weeks ago on this show and possibly trading him, but bringing back a veteran presence for him, like a team that has kind of a cap situation. I know Vegas is rolling pretty well right now, so they might, I don't want to make some moves next year, but like, hey, Vegas has shopped a couple of their guys around. Like, hey, can maybe Lafreniere be a guy that they want to look at there? That's a cap saver for them, and Rangers can get some, one of their veterans back in return. I don't know what. I feel like that might be the best situation for the Rangers. They can get a guy who can come in and be a producer right away, opposed to Lafreniere, where you're kind of waiting and waiting and waiting. And yeah, the potential's there. Like, maybe now is the time to sell him before he completely falls off the potential, boat here.
Yeah, I mean, look, Gallant obviously scratched him that one game. We heard the rumblings around the trade deadline. It seemed like a legit possibility that he might be moved. And because of where the Rangers are at in their timeline, their development, this window that's open for them at the moment, I think they need to find somebody and something that's more impactful or more reliable instead of just waiting around and hoping for it. So if that's a possibility and it's something that they can afford, that would make some sense. But again, there's not, after they get through re-signing the guys that they do want to keep around, both from an RFA and a UFA standpoint, if it even is any of the UFAs, I just right now, as they're currently constructed with this cap only going up $1 million, but I don't know how much money is going to be left over. And that's why when in the first couple of days after the series against the Devils ended, I was trying to figure out, well, how do we get creative? Like, what can they do? And there's so many of these contracts that have the no movement clauses and the no trade clauses that outside of somebody basically doing them a favor and saying yes, it's going to be very tricky for them to open up space in the short term. I guess in a trade, if they could get a team to withhold some salary again, but then you're probably talking about attaching another draft pick to making one of those deals. So I think Chris Drury's in a very tricky spot. I know he's worked some magic in the few years that he's been on the job now. I think he's going to have to do that again this offseason, or else I think we're going to be looking at a very similar team to the one that we just saw that ended in the playoffs. And whoever the new coach is, it's going to be a lot of pressure in year one to get things turned around, to maintain the regular season success to get them back to the playoffs, but then to find a way to light that fire under this group and get more out of them once the playoffs arrive, whoever it is that they might end up facing.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, like you said, I don't see how much ninjaing he can do with the cap this time around.
Yeah.
It's very tough to see. I mean, you have deals like Trouba, but like a guy like Barclay Goodrow almost has to go because
that's the one I think that
he's got. I think it's what 15 teams, no trade clauses, some possibility there, but
yeah.
You can't pay. You just paid Hedl. You just paid Trocheck. Mika's got $8 million.
Right.
You can't
your
pay
four
your
centers are making over $20 million. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't. He's making $3.6 million a year. You got a guy like Brodzinski who can do the same. Not the same thing, but he can play. At the minimum. And the fourth line, you got a guy like VC, and maybe you bring back Mott then, and he could play center too. I don't know. He just seems like he's the guy who's probably the odd man out, and I hate to say it, but I know Larry Brooks has brought up his name a ton. I don't know what his deal with him, but Ryan Lindgren obviously is a guy who could be moved. But what do you replace him with though? Like, what do you bring him back for a Lindgren that can match his intensity and what he gives to his team at only $3 million? Wish I had that too, but at $3 million,
no, I know what you're saying. Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like from a scope of it, like I don't see how his name is in a trade block at all.
I think that illustrates and speaks to just how tricky a spot that they're in, because in a normal scenario, you wouldn't ever be talking about moving that guy out, especially you look at, I think, the impact and the trickle down effect it had on Fox playing without him for a while. And it just seemed like he was just completely out of gas by the end of that Devils series. And, part of that, I guess, if you want to lay that at Gallant's feet for playing him as many minutes as he did. Obviously they played shorthanded for a while as well while they were waiting for the Kane thing to come through. I've heard some rumblings from some people. I don't know how accurate it is, but it sounded like maybe that was a bit of an issue in the room and a bit of a divide with the guys that ended up there post deadline. So when I look for reasons for why they didn't seem together or have that pushback or have that jump or that energy in the playoffs, and hearing that after the fact, it was like, okay, if that is true, it makes some sense. Now again, I don't know if it is, but to me, Lindgren's the kind of guy you want to keep around. But they've backed themselves into a corner with some of these contracts. You brought up Goodrow. When they signed him, it was sort of, you knew that they overpaid is maybe not the right word, but it was a luxury. It was they went above and beyond to bring him in, because in that offseason they were trying to add the grit, the veteran presence, the guys that had the postseason experience, the cup winning experience. But now I think it's less about him, the player, and again, more about the situation. And you just like, well, can't keep them all. If we're going to bring in some sort of outside addition and it's not a youngster from our own system, we don't have enough space to make all this work, both from a roster spot standpoint and from a cap standpoint. So, and there's only so many guys that have contracts that can be moved, and he's on the list, and he makes a decent chunk of money, where moving him out, even again, if you have to attach some sort of draft pick, if that's what they deem necessary to make some sort of other addition, that might be one of the casualties of the offseason.
Before we both get DMs, because I know there's a lot of Barclay Goodrow lovers out there. I like Barclay Goodrow, and
me too.
He's done everything. I mean, he had 2 career years with the Rangers. I mean, he's done everything that the Rangers wanted and more from him. It's just literally his contract is too much. Like he's made it is kind of the scenario, like you said, it's the cap hell they're in right now. He's just kind of the easiest out of what they need to do to get out of it. But there's a lot of Barclay Goodrow lovers out there, and I know that people
rightfully so. I mean, the pedigree's there, and again, in a different situation, he fits in beautifully, and he's exactly what you're looking for out of a bottom 6 guy, with the flexibility to be able to come up and play on the wing with the top 6 in a pinch if needed, penalty killing, locker room presence on the bench, all that stuff. Checks all those boxes, the intangibles. And early on in the series, he was impactful. But as the parts around him dry up and things kind of crash and burn, and they don't have a ton of flexibility, it becomes sort of a luxury that I don't think they can really afford anymore.
You brought up, which I always love, these things that come out afterwards. Like when they fired Gallant, I was like, oh man, I don't know if that's the right move. And all of a sudden now you start all these rumblings coming out like, hey, the room was kind of divided. The guys kind of complained about him. Then he wasn't in the exit interviews on purpose, because I guess, Drury wanted to hear out the players, and a lot of players came out and said, they just didn't like the structure. There was no lack of structure and everything else. And all this stuff comes out. And now there's a new thing, Jim Ramsay was just let go after 29 years of the Rangers.
Yeah.
And now there's rumblings that, he may have mishandled, or he's kind of the scapegoat for the Ryan Lindgren injury and the cap, the cap situation with that, with Christian. Now it's crazy. It's a lot of things coming out, and it's like, what is going on now?
That to me was even more of a red flag than the things I heard post the Gallant firing, just because of how long he's been there, how the players have sworn by him, guys that have come and gone. I mean, you heard Patrick Kane in the days after the season ended, who, barely got to know Jim Ramsay, and was giving him a ton of credit for getting him ready and available to play through this hip injury that's probably going to require surgery. So, I mean, I don't know the specifics of what went on with Ramsay and Lindgren, but for that relationship to come to an end, like him and Benoit Allaire, it seemed like, basically they could be there until they said otherwise. It almost seemed like they had that card, your job's here as long as you want it. So it was shocking for me to see that. I think I saw some sort of statistical workup the other day that I think it covered maybe the last 15, 20 years or so, and they lost like the least amount of games to injury. I don't know the exact
I saw
number,
the least amount of man time down. And
so, I mean,
I think
players swear by the guy. So I don't know. So maybe something went on behind closed doors that we're not privy to. You would almost have to think that had to be the case for them to make that kind of move. Shaking up the coaching staff to change up the vibe is one thing, but the training staff and the medical guys, it's a little different.
Yeah, that's just, I heard that from someone right after it happened. I was DMing, obviously going DM, you're like, what's going on? And someone finally, someone you get one answer, like, oh, I think it's a Lindgren deal. I'm like, what do you mean a Lindgren deal? Like, not even thinking about Lindgren's injury. And it's like, oh, because I guess, they kept on pushing him back, kind of messed with the cap, and they played short. And I guess obviously, like you said, kind of played into what you said. You heard rumors that the guys were mad about the playing short part of it. And then, a couple of that, and that's probably a perfect storm of of just anger.
Point
on both
being,
sides.
again, on the other side of it, it's like when we're looking at this series and the way they played in some of the games, it's like, this is not the team we watched all
Mhm.
year. Like, what's going on here? But, and again, things get put out after the fact, and it's hard to know, whose agenda who's got an agenda, what narrative is being forced out there to try and explain it, who's using the media as a pawn. So I don't know for sure, but as you start to hear some of this stuff and try to connect the dots, it at least makes it make a little bit more sense. But I think the big takeaway is like, man, a team that had what seemed like a real refreshing, solid regular season after the Trouba game with the helmet, which you already referenced, from that point on, really solid and consistent for the most part, and went into the playoffs. It seemed like feeling good. You get the peek behind the curtain a little bit, and it seems like, maybe it's things in Pleasantville aren't as pleasant as it might seem. Obviously, you got a new head coach coming in now, and I just wonder about the dynamic in the room. I wonder about Trouba's captaincy, his contract, these rumblings that I heard about, the divide with the team. Like, I'm just wondering how they're going to piece it all back together. You hope maybe taking the summer, get some space, new coach, new season, new outlook, fresh system. When they get to training camp, hopefully it'll be a different vibe, but there's a lot of questions to answer between now and then.
All right. So Jim Dolan calls you tomorrow and says you're hiring the head coach. Who do you bring in?
I knew you were going to ask me this question. And by the way, I was not fully against moving on from Gerard Gallant, but
I didn't want to move on either until everything comes out afterwards. Like,
yeah.
Okay, well maybe the guy. Okay, so I guess they kind of had their hands forced here. The guys didn't believe in him anymore. Kind of lost the room, but no, I thought I'm like 200, 109, 107, two of the best seasons Rangers history.
Yeah, again, I'm getting to this point now where I'm kind of forcing myself to differentiate the regular season from the playoffs and just looking at the matchups themselves, the adjustments that are being made within the series. Like, I mean, I think it seemed pretty evident that, Lindy Ruff outmaneuvered and outcoached him in that series. Now, you could make the case he's got a lot of talent, obviously, on his roster, and that's what made the Devils as good as they were. But I'd be very surprised if it's going to be a first timer. I think that's a risk that they really can't afford to take with this roster right now, with this fan base and where they're at. So you're going to be talking probably about one of the retreads. Go right down the list. None of them that I really love. I did love, and I know other people have put this out there, and it seems like it's a pipe dream that's not going to happen. I love the Mike Sullivan idea, but
yeah,
it seems like there's no reason to believe he's going to shake loose.
Well,
in
now
Pittsburgh.
there could be today. I don't know if you saw the news or not, but
What do we got? You're ahead of me. What do we got?
Kyle Dubas is now going to be interviewing with the Pittsburgh Penguins.
He is okay. So after
I
he
guess
told everybody in
they have permission. They have permission, but you don't get permission if you're not going to do it. You know what I mean? So who knows? Because if he brings Sheldon Keefe with him,
right,
that could open it up.
Sign me up for that.
That
scenario.
is my dream right now,
yes.
CeeLo. That is my dream that he comes back, because I think he would be a perfect guy for this team right now.
Same here. I'm with you. Let's double down and let's do a little dance to try and make that happen.
and then I guess like you hear the Mike Babcock rumors, and
yeah.
It's like he's the guy who I'm like, oh, I hope not, which will probably be next who's there higher, because I'm like, oh, I hope not. Laviolette doesn't like get me excited, but then you look at his numbers, you're like, okay, he's won everywhere. Like, he's been to 3 Cup finals, he's got 1 Stanley Cup. It's like he's done it. And then you look at the coaches that are left now in the playoffs, they're all retreads. Like, okay, so maybe that is the way to go. Maybe a guy needs a second shot, or a third, fourth shot for some of these guys. I don't know. It's maybe Sheldon Keefe. Maybe he's now going to be available. I don't know what the answer is, but like you said, I can't see them doing a first year guy. Although I'm a big Chris Knobloch fan.
Yeah,
and I've had a ton of guys from Hartford on the show, and they all just rave about him and how much of a good guy he is and good players coach he is. But
I just wonder. I mean, listen, not taking anything away from him. And look, if his players swear by him, that's awesome. I mean, that's his job there. But obviously, coming to the big stage, the bright lights, and I know he subbed for Quinn a little bit here and there, but with some of the upper echelon guys that they have, and it's a different dynamic, I would say, handling those guys and those personalities than guys that are down on the farm, for lack of a better phrase, that are trying to make it. But I mean, listen, those guys need a shot somewhere along the way to prove that they can do it. I'm just wondering if this is going to be that opportunity. I wouldn't mind Laviolette. I mean, I'm a little soured by the fact that things didn't go great in Washington, but that's an aging team. I don't know what coaching Ovechkin is like. I mean, I can't speak to that. I was talking to Boomer Esiason about that this morning off the air at Fan, and he brought him up, and I kind of said that, and he was just like, I think that was a tough spot down there with Ovechkin, and I wouldn't mind seeing him here. So sometimes Boomer has a way of his opinions are shaped by things he's hearing behind the scenes. I don't know if that's the case here, but
well, I think I think Levy interviewed this week, so maybe Boomer probably knows that.
Yeah, something to keep an eye on.
Well, how does he feel? Because he's talking on the Fan about, obviously he's talked about how much he likes his team and whatever else. But does he see this as a disappointment? Like, what is his feeling?
Oh yeah, no, he was very disappointed, especially with the top end guys. The fact that they came up small, didn't show up, questionable effort at times. So he's big on that, effort, attitude, laying it all out there. So he lives and dies with it. He's sometimes maybe like the rest of us can be irrational when it comes to the Rangers, whereas with football analysis, he's sort of got his objective hat on. So it's interesting. I always enjoy sort of comparing my reaction to things and how I feel versus how he views it. So yeah, I think I know in the day and the days after just listening to him, because I wasn't in the studio with him on those days, but a lot of the same things we've been talking about, I know he was feeling the same and felt like something was going to have to change, and that Gallant was probably going to be the odd man out. And sure enough, that's the result we got. So I don't know that he's really circled a favorite as far as the head coaching candidates. And it seems like it's a pretty lengthy list, and we're maybe not all that close to a decision being made. But man, maybe the Rangers are just trying to bleed the clock until Mike Sullivan might shake for.
That's why I think they're like, okay, let's hold off on him. I think like Quinville thing, obviously, like I think that just be a PR nightmare if they bring him in after everything. But
yeah, and you had multiple reports from the guys that cover the team that said it basically wasn't going to happen. So I've already put that one out of my mind.
Well, now that was like, oh, he's going to meet with Bettman to get, I guess now actually Bettman said no or whatever it was. Bettman said like, you're not coming back. You haven't done enough to come back, whatever.
Even if they met, I just wonder like how fast that process is going to move. And like, I know the Rangers aren't necessarily in a rush, but
there's 6 other job openings. There's 6 other job openings, and I guess 7 if you count Toronto maybe coming open. But I think they're the best job available. I would say. I would think.
I would hope so. I mean, there's plenty of talent to work with. I mean, like we've outlined, there's maybe not a ton of flexibility for, I don't want to say overhauling the roster, but moving out some significant pieces or making some significant changes, save again, somebody waiving a no movement or no trade clause, which, I mean, I don't know, stranger things have happened. The Rangers their front office seems to have an ability to work magic and convince people to do things or not do things. So I'm very curious to see how it all is going to shake out, from the coach to how they're going to handle their guys that they have under contract that are up for contracts. If there's some sort of trade that they're able to swing, and when free agency rolls around, what kind of money do they even have to spend?
Now, can you give a little feedback for Boomer? And obviously tell him to come on the show as well when you see him, but does not answer any of my messages. But
don't worry, you're not alone. Sometimes he doesn't answer my messages either. So,
but what I love about him is he's so fired up about the Rangers that he talks about it in the first hour of the show. I'm not awake for that hour. So by the time I get up and start listening at 8 o'clock in the morning, I have kids, by the time I actually settle in for work, he's already off his Ranger rant. So I need more Ranger rant later on in the day. And I love that it's fresh in his mind, but I need it a little later because I need to hear his, yelling about it.
Well, on days that I'm in there, I'm usually pretty good at circling back to it because I want to talk about it with him. But to plug my employer hat for a second here, you got the rewind on the Odyssey app, so you can go back and check out the early part of the show, where they're pretty good about podcasting all the segments of the show. So you could find that on all your podcast, whatever all the podcast devices or wherever you get your podcasts.
Exactly.
So it's available. But if you like to hear it live and on the old school traditional radio, then you usually got to get up pretty early, because even sometimes in the opening segment, when Gio wants to talk about anything but hockey or the Rangers, Boomer will find a way to wedge that in there. And it's not just Gio. Everyone else on the show wants the same thing. And if Boomer wants to talk hockey, he's going to talk hockey. Like today, he was fixated on Brooks Koepka and the Ryder Cup standings. Kept going back to it and couldn't get anybody off of it. So when he's committed to talking about something, there's pretty much nothing you can do.
Yeah, Jerry's not big on circling back to the Rangers whatsoever.
No,
No,
no.
no. He did during the playoffs. He would love bringing up the Rangers and Devils series in the
Oh,
playoffs,
sure.
and that just got Boomer a little angry too, which I loved as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
But I love a couple of years ago. My favorite call was this was the David Quinn. No, it was before David Quinn. I think it was Vigneault. I think it was years ago. And someone called up and they're like, "Oh, but you're a homer. You're a homer Boomer because the Rangers pay you to go to games. You have to be nice and whatever." And he freaks. I've been paying for tickets since I was I guess it was when he was with the Bengals when he started paying for season tickets. I guess whatever he was saying.
Yeah, I mean,
He's like, I've been paying for my tickets. The Rangers haven't given me anything in my life. He's like going on and on about it. I was loving it.
plus his fandom predates him
Yeah.
becoming any sort of, public figure, whether it be on the NFL, whether it be at Maryland. I mean, even high school ranks, like he's talked about it. It was one of the things that he bonded with his dad over, and a team that he's been following since he's a kid. So that's why, the Mets, I would say, are kind of next on that list for him, but the Rangers are so far and above anything else as far as his fandom goes. And that's why it's genuine, it's real. Again, sometimes it's emotional and it can be irrational like the rest of us. And I think that's what people appreciate about it.
I just loved it. I think it was before they even had the TV deal. Like he was like went off on the guy in there. I remember listening to the radio. I'm like, this is great. They haven't given me anything in my life. All they've given me is he's like, all they give me is heartbreak and blah blah. He's going on and on. He's like, they haven't had a winger since Rod Joel. He's like going on. Yeah. It was great. It was just a perfect blow up for him.
Every now and then, he's usually pretty stoic and even keeled, but if you can touch the nerve, you get a little rage out of him here or there.
Craig was like, he didn't care. Craig was like, all right, we'll move on to the Yankees. Like it was like kind of one of those things like, all right, Boomer's gonna calm down. We'll talk about the Yankees next. It was like, It's like, okay.
Moving right along. Yeah.
I guess who else is a Ranger fan there at the fan? It's like you and Boomer, right? Who else is he? I guess Sal's a fake Ranger fan because he goes to other games now.
That was so disappointing, and I'm glad I was there to call him out shortly after that went down. So, I mean, look, I will say this, Sal opens up his wallet in the playoffs, and he pays a lot of money to go to a lot of the playoff games, takes his nephew. But the Islander thing bothered me. But that's part of what makes Sal. He basically is out there and say, you want to buy me? I'll come. I'll come be in the owner's booth, and I'll eat the free food and all that good stuff. Other Ranger fans from the on-air crew, I would say Chris McMonagle, who works on Cartman Roberts.
Yeah.
Again, probably third or fourth on his depth chart. Big Yankee fan, big Giant fan. He likes the Rangers, but maybe not quite to the level that some of the others do. Paul Rosenberg, who works there as a producer, is a big Ranger fan. I'm not leaving anybody out. Keith McPherson has been turned on to the Devils. I'm just going through the shows.
He was talking about the Devils as playoffs.
Yeah, he kind of adopted hockey after he started working at the Fan, and the Devils sort of adopted him, and so he's been to a ton of games, and he's kind of got the bug, which is cool. My hate and disdain for the Devils, even though I've got a red hoodie on right now, is it's strongly rooted from my childhood and years of growing up in New Jersey in the Brodeur Cup years. But I will say this, my father-in-law, who is a huge Islanders fan, but lives here in Jersey, took my son and my wife to Game 5 at Prudential Center. I had to work, so I couldn't go. My son is becoming a huge Ranger fan, so it was an opportunity to go see a playoff game and, be in that environment. Obviously, it was a disaster for the Rangers. And my son's a little intense and he gets upset. So he was pretty angry as that game was playing out the way it did. As much as I hate the Devil fans, I wasn't there that night, but what I heard is that the people around them couldn't have been better. Like he was, screaming, "Devils stink, Devils suck." And they were like, "That's all right, buddy. As long as you're a hockey fan, you do you." So I will give those people that were sitting around him that were big Devil fans at Prudential Center that night a lot of credit. So I like being around passionate hockey fans. So, it's fun when the locals are good. And if they happen to match up against each other, and that was another disappointing aspect I thought of, the first round was the Islanders. I get it. The Hurricanes are really good. If the Isles had found a way past them, we would have been guaranteed a local team in the conference final, which would have been cool, but not to be this year.
Now, who do you consider a bigger rival, Rangers or Islanders? I mean, Devils or Islanders. I mean, yeah.
For me, it's the Devils, hands down.
Yeah, me too. I do too. Yeah.
And I get for the older Ranger fan, they're going to probably say Islanders, but in my lifetime, the Islanders have caused me no pain. So
Mhm.
I don't root for the Islanders, but I don't hate them. I got nothing against them, you know? And yeah, they've beat up on the Rangers here and there in the regular season in recent years. But I mean, I've seen one playoff series in my lifetime since I've been watching. And obviously that was the first round romp in 94, which was,
Exactly. It was
you
nothing.
know, a bloodbath. So the Devils have, you know, after 94 and 97 have caused significant more amount of pain. And again, for me, I moved back to Jersey in the summer of 97. So right as the Rangers were going into their dark years and the Devils were
Going there, yeah.
after
Cup years.
95, but 2 more cups on the way, and Brodeur and Scott Stevens, and then Patrick Elias comes along. And, you know, this was in the newspaper days, and I live and died with the Asbury Park Press down here in Jersey, especially when I was playing high school sports and they had all the high school sports in there. And it was 2 things. It was the Devils and it was Todd Frazier at Toms River South in high school, and then at Rutgers, and then obviously getting to the big leagues. So I have a lot of scars from those Devils teams. So that's why I mean, I don't care what happens. That's just in my blood, and there's nothing that's going to change it.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with you. Like, that's that 90, like the late 80s, 90s baby. Like that's like,
Yeah.
you grew up hating it. I mean, grew up in Long Island. I wasn't afraid of Zygmunt Palffy. Like you know what I mean?
No.
Like those Islander teams were nothing. Like the Fishman logo. Like I went to a lot of games. My buddies were all, I mean, we lived 20 minutes from the Coliseum, so we would go all the time there.
Yeah.
Plus they're like $10 for tickets post MSG. So we go all the time that, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
those
it's
teams,
like the Islanders are cute. That's kind
yeah,
of
they're kind of like
yeah.
oh, it's a fun, like, you know, like going to like a Long Island Ducks game, like, you know,
Yeah.
oh yeah, you know, all right, yeah, let's go to
Right.
a game for the night for, you know, for $40.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so I'll let you go. Thanks so much for jumping on with us, and hopefully we'll catch up with you again soon.
My pleasure. Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks so much for Chris coming on the show. Obviously, huge WFAN fan. Love him on the shows. I love that he brings some Ranger perspective in. Like we talked about with Boomer, like he brings the Rangers back up again, which is great because obviously hockey is not the number one priority on most talk shows in New York. So love to have a guy on the inside there, a huge Ranger fan. Love that he's raising his kid a Ranger fan. That's awesome to hear. So I can't take him enough. The guy is on SNY. He's on obviously WFAN. He's on CBS Radio. So he's everywhere. So to get a couple minutes with him was great. So thank you to Chris for coming on. And hopefully we get him back on again in the future because that was great. And that does it for episode 133 of the Broadway Hat Podcast. Make sure you go and subscribe to the show on all social media. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at the Broadway Hat Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Broadway Hat Pod. You can find my personal Twitter account at KHallNY for all New York Ranger updates. You can find, make sure you subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts as well. Every 5-star review this show does receive $1 is donated to Alexis Lafreniere Foundation. So please take a moment out of your day. Go check that out. Go leave us a 5-star review and help an amazing cause that help fight pediatric cancer. Make sure you go and subscribe to the show on Spotify. You also find the show on on Pandora, on Spreaker, Amazon Music. Everywhere you get your podcasts, you can find us there. And thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.